Amen. All right. So this week we're going over chapter 12, 13. But I have a feeling chapter 12 is kind of, if y'all read, but it kind of talks a little more about stuff that we don't really talk about as men, and even people that just aren't Christians at all don't really talk about either. But chapter 12 starts out, boys hold back emotional expressions, men are affectionate. Now, it doesn't mean like going, crying all the time. I think that's sometimes we think that's what it is all the time, but it's not. It's okay to have those emotional connections. You want to talk about the deeper stuff. You want to have the hugs. You want to have those important connections because, back then they literally agreed with the holy kiss. So, obviously it's a little weird nowadays, but you don't need to do that. You can grab a hug, a handshake or something, but it's important to have those things. It's important to talk about these things. Because if you don't talk, then no one knows what's going on in your life, and then you just kind of head a spiral down another way. So I started out with God didn't create robots. He created affectionate human beings that were meant to have a relationship with Him and the people that He puts around us. So it's very important that we have those relationships. And I'll kind of start out with the verse in 1 John chapter 4, for verse 16 to 21. And we have known and believed the love that God has for us. God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment, but he who fears has not been made perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, how can he love God, whom he has not seen? And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love his brother also. So, we've talked about love many times throughout our lessons and going through, but it's important to love. It's important to reflect the relationship we have with the God to those around us too. You don't. It's not fun talking to a brick. It doesn't talk back. We have to portray the love that we have with God to those around us, whether they're Christian or not. And then, David did this in 1 Samuel 20, verse 41. He actually talks about this. Can't remember what page it was. I think it was page 116 or 117. But David wept for his closest friend, Jonathan. And Jonathan was the son of the king that wanted to kill David. And we talked about this in detail last time, or a couple times ago. Mm-hmm. But that was his best friend. And he agreed with him holy kisses. He hugged him. He wept for him. This was his friend. This was his closest ally on earth. So it's important that we have these connections, these friends that we're close to. And obviously you don't want to just go and pick some random person off the street and say, you're my friend now. But
some holy hepatitis.
Yeah, you don't want that. But, we create these friendships and we bring down the walls that we had before so that we can have stronger connections. Y'all were talking about Messi earlier. But Messi can't win not Super Bowl, World Cup. Sorry, I was thinking football for some reason. Messi can't win a World Cup by himself, right? He needs a team. So we need a right team for ourselves too. Don't worry, I watched a lot of soccer. It's okay. Yeah. Now I'm back in the football mode. Yeah. Then in Luke 15, verse 20, the parable of the lost son. I think we all know that one, right? Even if sometimes our brothers and sisters are going to go off the wrong paths, and maybe they're going to go on for a while. They're going to squander everything they have, and they're going to, this is talking about a father and a son, reflecting God's love towards us. But that should be the same love that we have for our brothers and sisters in Christ. And even the people that...
No, I go.
I'm just going to finish that thing. Yeah. But even the people that we have around us. So I wanted to stop that right there, and then now I was going to let you answer questions.
No, I was going to say it's interesting because on the examples you use too, and the examples in Scripture obviously were not in the Americas, right? Like geography, they're,
mm-hmm.
And kind of that Middle Eastern area. Well, beyond that, all the examples that he used are also in, Europe, Asia, and
India and all that. Yeah.
those kind of areas. But if you go to the Americas, and Brazil is hugely influenced by Italians. If you go to those more Italian sections of Brazil, men with a kiss on the cheek. It's not normal among Brazil. Like we don't do that, but they do. And we do embrace with a very strong hug and say, I love you after the end of the conversation and stuff. I think it's I love you is used a little more in our Brazilian culture than I see it used here. And that's a sense of affection there as well. And then with men greeting women, you have a friendship with them, you greet them with a kiss in the cheek, right? Whereas as to here, it's seen as a little weird maybe if you're not super duper uber close, right? And so it's if you don't even have to go to Asia and Europe and whatnot to see these effects. You can go to the Americas, which a lot of times it's that Western Hemisphere. So it's important to know it's just purely a culture thing, but not only the foreign land of Asia and Europe, but also in the Americas too. You can find it close to home.
Yeah,
well, it's 5,000 miles south, but I'm sure you can find it in Central America too throughout.
Yeah. So back then, and nowadays, but in America back then, we were probably more affectionate stuff. People having barbecues and invite their neighbors over. We've talked about examples like that. But yeah, and all the other, literally almost every other country except for us, they're more, they're a lot more affectionate. They're a lot more welcoming, a lot more there in the moment. With those people. And I think sometimes, I don't know if y'all have ever met any Mormons, but I think Mormons are really good at this. They're really good at going out and building communities that are strong and affectionate and very backing. Sometimes I think we lack that in a lot of Christian households and Christian churches and stuff like that. So we should take some notes from that.
I think there's a lot of insecurity in our country, and security. We're missing out. Those are the best relationships. That relationships you have with your girlfriend and your wife, when you can start stepping into that with a friend. That's masculinity. When you see a couple of Italians greet each other with your kiss, that happens in America. It just happens with secure men that they're more in line with. They care more about what God thinks and having a masculine, godly relationship with their friends. They're not thinking of homosexual ramifications and what that looks like. This all comes back to, once again, testosterone. It's just leading with the things that God gave us, and all of a sudden you don't care what your neighbors or the world thinks. You care what your God thinks. Created in His image. That's a powerful thing all on its own. But so much of America is more interested in what's on their phone and social media, and lets that go rather than getting out there and making it happen. Movers and shakers kind of deal.
I'll say too, it's not this is something where we we just went to Camp Red Oak Springs, me and my dad, and going there's a lot of things that we have a preference of coming from the camp in Brazil that are way different there, right? Like can't wear flip-flops around, we can't wear sleeveless shirts. There's stuff like that just the culture-wise makes no sense to us, right? Being Brazilians. But we don't come here with an attitude to try to change the culture. And we hope that one day, hopefully, we're able to take some people. They don't go with an attitude to try to change our culture there in Brazil, right? So the important thing I think too is that we recognize those cultures, and like you were saying, don't try to sexualize anything like that in that culture, right? Just accept it for that culture. Doesn't mean that we have to inherit that into American culture. If you can show that affection by just being a great neighbor to your, the husband in your neighbor's house, household, and inviting them over for a barbecue or whatever, if that's the way that you show that affection here, that is more than acceptable, right? And if you grow that true friendship, just be really affectionate in that sense, because that's the culture we live in. You don't have to. Doesn't mean that there's right or wrong. I think it's neat how like a very physical affectionate culture is. I think it's neat that they do that there, but it doesn't mean that we're wrong to not put that in our culture. It just means that's how our culture is, and that's how theirs is. So when we talk about this, I think it's important to say I don't think the goal is to try to change the American culture into an Italian or an Arab culture. I think the goal is just to not look at them differently because of it, and then know how we can make our culture affectionate too.
I thought I just read a scripture that said that's a godly culture.
Yeah. Well, it is, but I'm just saying, it's you don't have to go about trying to change everything. You can.
Yeah, I'm not telling y'all to go around just kissing everyone. Don't think I'm doing that. You don't want herpes, you don't want those other stuff that happen. I'm telling you is have those barbecues or the American way of reaching out to people. Because what people were doing back then. Because nowadays, any one of us probably don't invite their neighbor over enough, We probably don't even know half our neighbors, and if you do, that's good. I'm proud of you. But what I'm telling you is we can't, be a solitude fortress of just ourselves. Or yeah.
All good discussion. One of the best examples I think of, and it's not a marketing plug for life groups. That's what our life groups are for.
Right.
And again, moving all the good discussion, and I'll share a thought on that in just a moment about your good point with this Tyson, not confusing, the true spiritual growth and showing that we care. And that's what our life groups are for, is where we can peel back that next level and to y'all's point, invite neighbors in. I'm gonna get a yard sign and help I'll talk about this with the other life groups. So letting our neighbors know that on Sunday nights, the Lancaster house, anybody's welcome if you're 9 to 9. Because even on the church, right? We're still trying to bring more in to homes to grow more.
That's a great idea.
That's what I mentioned it's charity. I dropped this seed with her on the parent thing. We'll probably get some. So to me, I think that's what your messaging. And as Christ followers, we don't confuse there's no emotion. If y'all talk about I've shared some of my world travels. I lived in Algeria, North Africa, boots on the ground for 3 years, and every person you see, you kiss them on the cheek on each side. There's no more emotion around that than just shaking somebody's hand.
Mm-hmm.
In Saudi Arabia, 5.5 years with senior leaders in the chemical plant I worked at, they held my hand walking through the chemical plant.
Huh.
I'm not exaggerating. They would hold my hand. That's tradition. That's what people do.
Yeah.
We don't confuse the two to what you're saying. Is we got to open up our spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think about.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the life group, pray about it. See, come
talk to me.
Yeah. That's how you get close. And there's other examples, but I thought of life groups when
No, that's great.
you're talking about the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of times too, whether there's people out there that don't like church or don't like the people in church or that they think that they can do it, they think, all right, I'll just do it with God, I'll just be on my own for it. It's good to have it's perfect to have those alone times with God, but God didn't create man to be alone. He, why would he create all of us to just be in our own little circle? It doesn't make sense. He created other men to help other men, just like Jonathan and David. There's a reason why God put us all here at this time,
Well, he says be a light, and we live in a lonely society. And when men look around and they see two brothers in Christ embracing each other in a way that they're not used to seeing, that's exciting. That's marketing.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. And
But go ahead.
oh yeah,
No, I'm kidding.
you can come teach the class. I was kidding. But and all the people that are lost and don't have Christ or don't know this, they're probably just coming from a household where maybe there was no father or mother, or maybe, you don't know what they're coming from, but maybe they were beat pretty harshly. Maybe just didn't have this affectionate love. It's scientifically proven that, a handshake or a hug, that actually does boost testosterone and other things, not homosexual stuff, we're not doing that. But, having that affectionate, or being invited over, that tells this person in their heart that this is somewhere that they're welcomed. This is somewhere that, there's a greater presence than just this person and me. There's, God's there. So, being that light, being that healthy relationship that these people can turn to that aren't Christians, because, we're not trying to heal the already healthy, right? We're trying to heal the sick. So we got to plant those seeds and invite those people and have those affectionate ways, like a manly, affectionate way. Any last questions for chapter 12?
Well, I just want to make a couple
Comments?
points
Mhm.
that the author made. To me, some of the most compelling arguments for men touching one another in non-sexual ways is it's important to your not testosterone but other physical things. It's like it improves your heart rate, it improves blood pressure and cortisol levels. I don't know if anybody knows anything about cortisol, but if you try to lose weight and your cortisol is spiked, it ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. You have to reduce your cortisol levels. And so touching helps that. And, and these other examples here are great. Your brain responds positively with chemicals, okay, when in response to the human touch. And and then one of the most important points to support what you said about, American society and especially men are isolated. Remember that we mentioned in the very beginning, not only in Joby's book, but in this book, the suicide rate is 3 to 4 times higher among young males than young females. And to me, that's a lot of evidence for, the ladies have got it together. They know how to share their emotions, and it helps deal with the stresses of life much more effectively.
I would actually be really cautious.
Cautious?
Statistic, because the statistic is that men successfully commit suicide at rates that higher than
Okay.
women. Women actually attempt suicide more often.
Really? So I guess Brian needs an asterisk. in his book.
Yes.
Well, attempts and completing is 2 different things.
Men are more likely to use a gun, which is a far more effective way of anyway. So yeah,
That's great. Thanks
Thanks
for bringing that up.
pretty big caveat.
women have plenty of issues too.
Yeah.
And then one last thing, we talked about it's not a thing in American culture, but I love the way he covered the history. The 19th century American culture was a bit different than it is now. And in the reading, he basically said, if you look at photographs in the 18 whatevers, guys are touching each other much more often. They're arm in arm. They're even in the letters that were written in the 19th century, men affectionately greet one another, And then to your point, Jeremy, it's in here that in 2005, when President Bush invited the Saudi Arabian Abdul to come to his Crawford, Texas ranch, he not only greeted him with a kiss, but he held his hand as they walked around the ranch, because he knew that that was acceptable to their culture and it was a way of building the relationship. So this is all great stuff to me. I was, other than his point, which is very interesting, that the ladies think about it. I mean, this is good stuff.
And I think we've all seen those movies where it's like the last man on earth, zombie apocalypse, or, the whole world just went to crap. But in those scenarios, you are technically more likely, you're depressed, you're lonely, you have no one to talk to, you're probably more likely to get sicknesses in all sorts of ways. But we see that nowadays too, by kids being locked away in their room with an iPad or something. And they develop these peanut allergies, they don't experience the outside world. They don't develop those immunities that God put out to be when they go play out in the mud or something when they're younger. So there's an importance to not being shoved in a room and isolated. There's an importance to being together and having that outside experience. To the weirdo in the back.
You said
I'm just kidding.
peanut allergies are not drinking that wrong.
Wait a second.
You said peanut allergies from not going outside.
Well, I said as an example, but if you think about it, like back then, we were a lot more healthier. People could handle the sun a lot more better. There weren't as many allergies, for example. And there is scientific studies that children who play out in the mud develop these immunities and the antibodies inside their body. But the reason they don't develop that now is because their children are just inside all the time because the mom's too scared to bring them outside and experience it.
It's a hyperbole, but I'm sure there's you can build immunity to almost anything if you're exposed to it. So it's
Yeah. But what I'm just trying to point out,
Drink from water.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, something
that
limited to something. Yeah.
I'm talking about God made things, not man made things. The
Run it till you turn it on. Yeah, yeah. You just have to let it run for a minute.
but so there is science back to it. I mean, there's always science back to what God says. I mean, one thing I kind of point out on a different note, but God stands out from any other God that I know of or that I've read or have seen. Because I mean, we're supposed to reflect the relationship with God and us to those around us. So how God portrays that love, I mean, he sent his son to die. I mean, no other God has ever done that. Usually they just make us build pyramids or make us work until we're dead and then serve them until nothing, they just kill us when they feel like it. That's not what God does, So God is a different God for a reason. And he stands out, and most people hate him for that reason.
I was gonna make one last note. I think that when you talk about these changes, in culture and whatnot, I think it's very important to notice that changes in culture, and then in America's culture, it should be a little more affectionate towards one another, or like what Jeremy was saying, inviting people into your home. These changes happen slow, and it's not a race. Because if you try to race it, if Jeremy just goes out and forces people, you have to come to my house, or you're not invited to church. That's gonna scare people away. Right, things like that do not work. It's not a race, and so it takes patience too. Like with our neighbors, we try to be more affectionate, right? And so far, like Mr. Jeremy, who was always very nice, lending me equipment to go do my work with and stuff. He hadn't shown much interest at church. Doesn't mean we give up on it, but we continue being affectionate in the way that we, I'll greet him with a hug and whatnot, and I, say hi to him and we chat and whatever. But the most important thing is just I ask him about his day and I ask him how he's doing and I ask him about his family, right? And those are the ways I show my affection to him. And one day, hopefully, that will reflect in his interest to come to church with us, right? But it's been 12 years. It's not a race, it's not a race, and I think that's the most important thing to notice too when reading this, because we can read this book and get really excited and let's spark some change. We are sparking a change. Yes.
Yeah, but don't not do this.
Yes,
if you
exactly.
fail at doing it, that's okay. But as long as you try,
Exactly.
I mean, all it takes is an invitation to do an activity, whether it's running or playing some bingo on a Saturday night or something. It takes an invitation, and half the time, most of these people don't get an invitation. Even from their own families, because these people are lonely. When you don't have God, loneliness does creep into you, and that's where the devil works best. So now we'll talk about chapter 13 now. We'll get started with that. This just kind of builds on what we've just been saying. But I start out with iron sharpens iron. Proverbs 27:17 is probably a verse that y'all heard, dozens of times. But it's true. I mean, back then, the blacksmith would make tools. They used iron to sharpen iron. They used tools to make tools. Be that tool for someone. Sometimes that tool, the other person might not, reciprocate all the time. And sometimes you might not reciprocate all the time, but build that relationship that builds each other up. You don't want to be having these relationships where you're up all the time and they're never up, or you don't want to be the drain too, you don't want to vice versa. But build these strong relationships to closest people, whether it's your best friend or your brothers, sisters. Build these relationships because it's important to have these really close relationships. Like Jonathan and David. I mean, that was his closest buddy right there. He literally died for him. They went to war together. He hid him. He hid David from his own father. He was willing to give up his rightful heir to the throne for David. He could have just killed David and took the throne over, because he was next in line. But no, he loved David. So that's the type of friendships we should have, those close people, not just 1,000 other people that you kind of talk with and stuff.
I think it's interesting that it's iron that we talk about. Not everybody's lonely. There's a lot of people out there that are, they're got a lot of bravado, a lot of friends. It takes iron to reach one of those. You know, when we were kids and you go out and you pick a basketball team, you didn't start with the shortest people. You know, you want the A game players. We need to be playing with the A game players here too. This is not just a social event. This is iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
We should be seeing changes on a weekly basis. There's nothing too big for our God.
Yeah, we should be seeing changes. The next part, and he talks about this, but he says men give their friends hunting licenses. You know, what does that mean? Well, it means you trust someone, you give them the ability to come back at you with stuff that you're doing wrong. You know, you know, in a brotherly way. You know, you don't just say you're awful because you did that. No, you say, you know, you've been doing good in a lot of these areas, but you know, you're failing in this area. You know, you need to correct this. You need to fix this, whether it's pornography or drinking or lust, you know, whatever it is. You need to have those brothers that you can talk with that about these situations where you can feel comfortable with taking that criticism, because you know, most of the time, we're not really good at taking criticism. You know, we shun it. We say, "Oh, you're just talking out of your butt." You know, you do this. Why are you talking to me about that? But you know, we're not perfect. So if you can't allow yourself to take criticism, then you know, you don't have any good friends. You know, you don't want to be lied to, right? And it's like when you're fat and you ask someone you're fat and they just keep telling you, "No, you look beautiful." Well, that's just going to hurt you in the long run. You're going to live to 50 and then die. You don't want to be that guy. You want to take the pain up front and then work on it. And so then you live, you know, maybe you're 80 or something. So it's important to have these trustful ways of talking to each other, and you're not just lying to each other all the time. So it's important to, what he says, give these hunt licenses so you can point out the errors so that y'all both can grow and be better and stronger in your ways.
Yeah, without criticism, you can't. It's not necessarily you won't have friends if you can't accept criticism, but you won't have the friends who will help you grow. You can't grow without criticism. In any job you do, you're trained by criticism, and if you can't accept that, you won't grow professionally. You won't grow spiritually. Right? You'll stay very stale because you need criticism. You need to seek criticism. You know, I always the fun thing about flying is you fly with different people who have different experience. They have different knowledge to give you. They all do some things a little bit differently. And then after a while, I can pick and prune, you know, and adjust and have my own style a little bit. But that comes from criticism, from me doing something and people say, "Hey, I really wouldn't exactly do that. Here's the way I would do that." And so, you know, it goes way past, you know, it's huge for spiritual, but even in this world to enjoy life today, right? Because we're called to also enjoy our life here on earth. To do so, you need to be able to take that criticism.
Yeah, and I think, you know, whether you see the people on, you know, the big television people or something, or, you know, anyone famous, I do believe that we're all lonely. I mean, everyone goes through a season of depression multiple times throughout their life. Depression doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be a way to make yourself realize, okay, I have to do something better, you know? But a lot of these people don't know how to deal with that. So I think the majority of people on this planet are lonely, even if they have hundreds of friends, followers. They're just looking for attention, and it's not enough. So they're always going to have that lonely void in their heart. And we need to portray what's against that loneliness, and that's God. That's this relationship we have with Him and us, and then us with each other. That's directly coming down from God. So I would say that majority of anyone else, they're pretty lonely, you know, whether they're in their house thinking alone, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to fight through this battle, because everyone says, "Oh, just be comfortable with yourself," or "Oh, just it's okay to do that," or "It's okay," you know. When everyone's just letting everything slide, maybe deep down they just want someone that actually tells them the truth. So
I think maybe empty. But I know a lot of people that are not lonely, and I think the devil kind of uses that as a tool. You know, they're filling their life up with. I was on the Guadalupe River. I told you guys last week on an interview with 20-something people. I asked was, how many people around me fear God, and it was an empty looks, but they're all close friendship network. You know, it's I think big difference between living a life of emptiness and being lonely.
well, loneliness is not having God. I think that's the loneliness I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's the emptiness. yes, there's a worldly, friendships, and those friendships are good sometimes, sometimes those are really good friends. What I'm talking about is it starts with God and goes down to us, and then we portray that out. So you're like a mirror that you're reflecting that light off, and that should be the relationship that we should be having.
Christ when you are describing them, that Solomon in my mind. In the Old Testament, right? Solomon reminded us, I've tried everyone, right? I've had them, had money, I've had this thing. True happiness is in God.
Because there's only one relationship that beats them all, and that's God. I've said that a million times already, but if it's already working, if it's already perfect, we should be portraying that perfectness. We should be, Christ should be in us and be seen in us. Because if he's not seen in us, then you're not doing your job. Someone raise their hand.
I love the points that Brian brings up in this chapter about and to support what Trey is saying, not for people that are lonely, but let's say you have Christian friends here at this church that well. I've done them, and so have other guys. They get into bad habits of doing things that are not good. I won't use any names, but I had a former member of this church, a Christian brother, who had a bad habit of just publicly criticizing his wife. And we met with him, including an elder, and we said, you don't realize how damaging this type of conversation is. You cannot publicly criticize your wife. And so he got the message, but I think we assume that everybody knows that. But I think what happened with this particular individual, he grew up in a household that was highly critical of all the family members. And I think his mother to himself, he didn't even realize that these social rules of engagement, didn't apply to him. He didn't think it applied to him. And so it's up to us as Christian men to say, no, that's not going to work. You're not going to have a marriage much longer. So that's one example. And then the other one I love that he brings up in here, everyone in their career makes sacrifices, right? There's times when I can't be with my children, I can't be with my wife because I've got a dedicated project or something really critical I have to finish. But like in the case that he brought up, when you keep using that same excuse for 2 years, we've got a problem. And so it's up to us as friends of one another to say, no. You're not spending any time with your marriage partner, and you're not spending any time raising your kids. You put your job too often number one, and it's gone on for an extended period of time. That's where the iron sharpening iron comes in and says, you need to take a fresh look at this, in a kind but considerate way. You need to take a fresh look at this and let's reevaluate, how you're leading your life, because you're going to get yourself into a bind. You're going to get yourself into trouble.
And the Bible talks about exactly what you were saying in that first point, where if you see someone going down the wrong way, you don't just yell it out to the whole church or to everyone around them.
Right.
You confront them, two or more people, and you tell them about it. If they don't listen, then you come back again. If they don't listen the third time, then I think they kick them out or something. But the point is, you don't just yell it out to everyone. Because then to that person, you're not really thinking about, oh, what I'm doing wrong. You're thinking about, you just embarrassed me in a bunch of dozens of people. So then they're just going to hate you more, and they're going to turn away, and you're going to be an enemy for life.
Yeah, everything I just described before, my 2 comments, that has to be handled privately, confidentially, to help resolve that. We're not going to roll somebody under the bus in front of the church.
Yeah, and when you do that, you really just, what you're saying is that, oh, look, I just found what this guy did wrong because I'm so good at seeing this, or I'm so good at being such a good guy. So you don't be doing that, take them secretly, and so that they can correct that and then come back better without the criticism of the whole entire community on them.
Amen to that.
I mean, you see when people post on Instagram or Twitter or any of these things, bashing someone, it ruins their whole career. They're done for life. Everyone on the entire planet hates them. That's what it feels like. So you can do that more than ever in this day and age than you were to before. Because then everyone's against this person. They did this one bad thing, and now they're doomed. So you don't want to make
Not
people,
right.
yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't know if anyone follows soccer, but if you do, and you follow the World Cup a little bit, there's a clear example of this right now. So Messi, a very
Yeah.
hugely beloved player by everyone. There was some drama with, allegations of Argentina, paying off refs and stuff this World Cup. And if you look online on social media, Messi is being very bashed right now, which has never happened. And all that changed in a matter of like a span of 2 weeks. He went from being probably one of the most beloved players by everyone to only liked by Argentinians. And it's like, it's something extreme. Like, is it really, is 2 weeks worth enough to bash someone's whole life over, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's a clear example. That's on a world stage kind of thing, but it doesn't take much to ruin an image. So
Don't be the person to brew hate.
yeah,
There's a right way to come about showing the wrong way that someone's at. There's a right way to steer them the correct direction.
and yeah, that's what my point was. The people that are bashing online, it's not worth making those comments online because you gain nothing from it, right? You just foster room for hate to grow, and that's just a very dark thing to do. And there's no reason for it.
Yeah. And if we're reflecting God, hate's not of God, so don't be doing it. And then you talked about Messi, and I talked about this too earlier. But we need a team that covers our blind spots. It's what we're building on. You can't see everything. I mean, I can't see what's behind me. I can't see what's to the side of me. I need someone there, like a soldier, who covers my back. When you're clearing a room, there's usually two people around. One clears one side when they're entering the door, one clears the other. Brady knows all about this. But it's soldiers work in teams. They don't work in solo, Rambo stuff. That's in the movies. We're not in the movies. We're in the real world, and teams matter. We need backup. Sometimes we need to be carried out of the fire. And when you look at these firemen, sometimes the firemen need help carrying out people. They're going into these crazy buildings with fire and they can hardly breathe in it, even with their mask on. That's why they have teams with it. That's why they have a buddy right there beside them going through the flames. So if you look to the daily things we see, we can portray that in a godly way too. Whether it's the person sitting next to you or whoever it is, you need to have a close buddy. You need to have a team. Whether it's the church, find those people that can be your team. Start with the people your family. Build those connections. And if you don't have any brothers and sisters, reach out to the other closest person you have. But we can't win a World Cup by ourselves, no matter how good you are. I mean, sometimes they kick out the greatest player because he can't work with everyone else. Sometimes, the greatest person, quote unquote player can't learn how to bring his team up because he's always bashful and hurting them, and so they end up losing the game. You can probably find dozens of examples of that. And then we all have different minds. We're not thinking all the same. Sometimes we're thinking one way, and then the guy next to us finds a better route. It's like when Siri gives you multiple directions to go one way. Thankfully, she gives us hopefully the best one, but be able to provide good comments and stuff in ways around things or obstacles or ways through them that maybe they didn't think of or maybe you didn't think of. So it's important to grow in each other our minds. God gave us the will to think, so use it. Any other comments to that? Any thoughts, questions, concerns?
Well, I think on a team concept, I know like when you guys were young, you fight for attention and you put each other down, but when you got older, I said, quit that childish crap. You're growing up now, quit taking shots at each other, one-upping each other, you're part of the same team. I think some of the older guys in here and younger guys, there's probably not a person in here that hadn't said, I'm not going to say what my dad said, talking down to this generation. So we're the coaches for these younger guys. You know, if you're a coach of a team and your team sucks, you don't start making fun of your own team.
Yeah, don't do
You
that.
know, we raised this team and we have some responsibility. We've got a dog in this fight. So we need to stay connected as a team. And if you're the leader of that team, we don't all need to be the same,
Mhm.
you know, but you need to recognize your spot in that circle. You know, put roses in the sunshine where they grow. Put your players, let people breathe kind of deal.
Yeah, teams, they have different positions, like you were saying. We're not all the team dunker, you know. We're not all trying to dunk the ball in the hoop. Some of us are too short to do that. Some of us, you know, are made just right for it. But you know, sometimes we need the guy that gets the rebound, you know. If y'all know basketball terms, I don't know if you know what I mean, but sometimes you're good.
Are you done?
Yeah, well, no, I can dunk. I can put it up there. I haven't jumped enough times to.
With the 7 foot.
Yeah, okay. But what I'm saying is, you know, we all have our part. Yeah, we can't do that. I can put down if you don't.
I can't go, so I would be the supporting cast.
Exactly. We all need to work together, you know. Everyone has their role to play. Don't all try to reach for the same role. You know, realize where God's put you and be like, okay, this is my position to play. You know, maybe I'm not the one standing up here in class teaching this, but maybe I'm the one that you know, supports in other ways. There's plenty of other ways to support. I mean, God talks about this directly. How, you know, Jesus is the head of the church, and you know, you got the arms, you got the legs, you got the body. So whether you're the legs or the arms, the hands, you know, be reaching out, be playing your part, and be supporting your team members. You know, vice versa. No one's ahead of each other. You know, just because you're the leader doesn't mean you're better than anyone else. You know, whatever it is, be supporting and be pointing out what we need to fix in a loving way, because we all have our part to play.
I think a big thing with playing your part too is that you don't know what that part is if you can't, you know, especially when you're new to a church or something. And my dad always told me this, though, kind of, you know, the guide to my future. He said he came from being super involved in Brazil to coming here and not knowing anybody, right? It's a weird feeling when everybody knows you and then out of nowhere you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he had to ask, like, hey, what can I do? You know, how can I get involved? You don't have, if you don't, you know, a lot of times it's good to say, you know, do your role, but it doesn't mean you have to find out that role on your own. You
Mhm.
can always just ask what needs to be done and step into something that, and doesn't have to be the first thing that gets told to you, just step into a role that matches you. But you gotta, you know, it's okay to ask, you know, it doesn't have to come naturally.
Yeah, you know, I like what you pointed out, because when I was younger, I mean, pretty young now, but when I was in the youth group, we talked about, or I just had this desire to, you know, get out of my comfort of being solitude, you know, not really talking to people, or we're not really standing up, you know, doing this type of stuff. So I got the opportunity. I asked my youth leader the opportunity, or to have the opportunity to, or okay, I'm saying speak. I asked him to give me any opportunities to lead or something, or to do those things. And then I started with saying the communion or the prayer, the opening prayer, and I did the communion prayer, some other stuff. So ask for these opportunities. You know, make yourself uncomfortable, but everyone else around here is here to help you portray or seek those goals. You know, because we all want to, you know, play a piece in this. You know, we all want to work together like a clock. You know, and the mechanisms. You know, we all want to we all want to be a cog in the machine for the greater purpose. So
And not all things are seen too. There's a lot that goes on in this church that is behind the scenes. Worship service with, you know, parent organizing, all of this stuff that goes on in the background, to a bunch of stuff that happens throughout the week with, you know, Denise and all their work here and stuff. So you know, not everything has to be seen to you, and just as much if you're not being recognized for it. So
God says even the ones that are unseen are probably even more highly regarded to God. You know, because maybe they might not be praised here on earth. You know, might not get a congratulations, you know, up by the preacher or something. But God is definitely looking down at you and saying, you know, well done, good and faithful servant. So start doing some good and continue doing it. You know, continue playing a good part in this. That's comments.
He says yeah, either or, either you get your reward on earth or you get it in heaven.
Well, you can get it here on earth and on heaven. I think you can still have praise here.
Yes.
But sometimes some people like in other countries may never feel a good job upon them by another man.
I think it's where your heart's at when you're doing it.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're playing your part, God's looking down at you and you know, he thinks, well done. So don't look for man attention, you know, look for God's attention. Be affectionate, kiss each other, yeah, all that. All right, go to God in prayer. Lord, we thank you for everything you've done for us. We know you're not like any other God that anyone else worships. You're the capital G God, Lord. You should be the leader of our lives, Lord, the King, because you've shown us what good is, Lord. You've shown us what it's like to have a true friend die for us and take all of sin and punishment upon himself so that we may have a chance in our sinful lives, Lord. Help us to portray that among others, Lord, for we know that just like those people that are still lost, we were lost before until you reached out. So help us reach out to them and help us to build each other here, Lord, because maybe one of us here are looking for a friend or looking for someone to show them what they maybe have not thought of. Help us to build each other up and help this men's class to grow, and we can bring some new blood in here, Lord, and continue to teach and plant the seed of your goodwill, Lord. In glorious name, amen.
Awesome.
Thanks for leading us tonight.
Of course.
I like the way you added more material in there that wasn't in the book. And the John verse and everything, that was great. That was awesome.
Appreciate it.
Cool. We get to.
Good to see you, Bo.
Thank you.
Forgot to ask if you had any
Good
comments
job.
on
Good job.
that. Thank you.
Good deal.
Bo.
Yeah. We got a few more minutes.
But he's got to go. So what he's doing.
Hey, Bo, are you still there? Oh, I think he exited. Which is okay.
Well, he was there when I was talking. I didn't know
Yeah.
we were supposed to leave. So
Oh, no worries.
But.
Go ahead and end it.
Yeah.
Make sure he is participants. Oh, actually, Isaac's online too. Hey, Isaac, can you say anything?
Now, well, I know with our life, just even years now.
I think Isaac's got his mic off.
Was it 2
All right, well, we're gonna close the session down. All right, goodbye, everybody.
All right. Good.